Okay, well, without further ado, I want to introduce our guest lecturer this evening. Hi, Libby.
Hello. Yes, thank you for letting us come.
Thanks for coming. Yes, welcome back to Latin American Art.
Yeah.
Well, we have a treat this afternoon. We have a visiting guest lecturer from all the way from Bogota, Colombia, the capital of our neighbor to the south, and she is here for a short visit. And I want to thank Maria Bustos of the Spanish Language Program and Latin American Studies for actually informing me about Slenka's visit. So. But let me first tell you a little bit about Slenka Botello. She is a cultural and art historian in Bogota, Colombia. She's also professor of visual arts at the Universidad Nacional Abierta y a Distancia, which is known as UNAD. And it literally is a strictly online university, right, in Colombia. So it's the National University, National Open University for Distance Learning. So that's roughly a translation. She's also director of an institute known as the Semillero de Investigación en Artes Visuales, and that's an incubator for the visual arts also in Colombia. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you do there. Anyway, her research revolves around the study of representations of the deformed, the monstrous, and the not normative body in the history of art and in the material culture of Latin America from the 16th to the 18th century. So this is perfect for our class discussion, and so we welcome Slenka Botello. Lord is yours.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Well, thanks to the university and the professor to have me here. It's a really nice moment for me. It's the first time I will do a lecture in English, so please, sorry if my English is understandable, but I will do my best. So, as the professor says, I'm interested in monstrosity in art. I have been working in recent years about 16th to 18th centuries paintings and prints about demons, monsters, and other kind of beings that is not as usual to have in art, but that I think they tell us many things very interesting about the society that do these paintings or this image. So today I want to first I will record myself. Sorry. Well, we will start by recognizing the maps. The most part of the image of monsters that I will show you today are in maps like this one. These maps were made for the Spanish and sometimes the England and other kind of European traveler or not traveler that knows about the New World. The New World was very important in this time, as you know. Make the maps was a way to recognize the territory, but it was a way to recognize what kind of beings, animals, plants, and all this stuff they, the Europeans, can use for their own service. So you can see in this map, this is one of the most interesting because they have a lot of monsters here. So you can see a little part of Africa, there is North America, and we have all the part of South America, which is the most important in this map. This is from early 16th century. So it shows us two kinds of monsters, here, and there are a lot of bits in the sea, and I want to talk about. This is the first monsters we will find in these kinds of maps, but two in the rights and in the documents that Colón and other of the travelers made about these journals. And they talk about the cannibals, like a group of people that were really intense and violent and they used to eat other groups of people. And the interesting thing is that the cannibals existed before the Europeans knows about America, but they really do not afford to be like, credible, because yeah, you know. And in the text you can read about Columbus and all the other people. They always say they listen about these cannibals, but they never see them in their real life. So this is really interesting because they will do that with all the monsters. They will always tell a story about the monsters, but they never show the monster wasn't real, and they never see them actually. So this is very interesting. Here we have the same map. The point of Patagonia, the south land, we have Patagones. And Patagones, as you can see here, were big size, always. And here they start a myth about all these people that live in the south of the continent as people that was friendly, but really big size, and they start to see how they can civilize these groups of people after Magallanes travels. So this is the Magallanes, Stretcho of Magallanes, I don't know how in English. And Magallanes will tell us, is the first person to tell us about the Patagones.
It's the Strait of Magellan. Straits of Magellan.
Oh, thank you. And here I think it's very interesting too, in that part, you can see sirenas, I think, no, the
Mermaids.
Oh, mermaids, yeah, that. You know that. Mermaids are the other monsters that always appear in this first image, because the sea will, it was the most important space where the travels were. So you will always see sea monsters in these representations. I will return a little bit. I know it's so, well, like this part. There are other kind of sea monsters, but not humanized, you know, and this is very important. I will just talk about monster and humans, and not monster and beasts. That's different in my work. So we have this kind of representation. We have another kind of maps here. This is really different. It's not as usual as we see the other maps, but we have Peru, Chile, Brasilia, and you can see this is Brazil, so we have to turn in our minds the map. And here in Brazil, we have again the cannibals. These were the most popular legend or myth that the Europeans start to create about American people. And it works to can fight for these lands. You know, they can't fight for this land and ask for these lands if the people here is always friendly, because there are not an excuse to have these lands for themselves. So always this kind of monstrosity representations works in that way, in a political way, and they use a lot this kind of representation for that. We have Chile too. Sorry for the image, I know it's not so good, but this part are the Amazonas. And we start to see in all these kind of representations that we have herencia, what is it? Inheritance from the myths of Europe, but for the myths of classic war too. And the monsters being to be real things of that reference. So we have here Magallanes again, and we can see many kind of monsters and human monsters like this mermaid, but two animals and beasts that are fascinating and that tell us a story all the time. We can see the gods too. And Magallanes and all the travelers that appear in this kind of image are always like heroes. So his image or the image is always in the center, and they are always pretty good looking. And the rest of the, the rest of the image is just like it's like to put a message. We are here the heroes, and we are here the important people, and we are just discovering this fantastic but exotic world, and it will be us. That was always the reference. Here I have more mermaids, and I want to say an important thing about this image. You can see that most of them are prints, grabados, and also form to do the image or to make, are very important in that period. Remember, it's the Renaissance period, so the event and the use of prints is really important to diffuse the things that they were discovered and discussing in the intellectual world and in the religion and political world. So these prints were always part of this huge imaginary that European people start to have about new world. I think, sorry, but I want to talk about the difference between this mermaid and these other sea monsters. You can see here that there are still the cannons, we can say that, of the way they represent and draw the body is always the classical canon. Yeah. There is not a different way to make the image, and to me that's really interesting, because here you start to see different ways to represent the people, and this is still a human kind of human animal monster, but it put difference in the way to make the monsters out of the traditional canons. So this is monge? A monk fish, sorry. And this is a similar one, I forget the name of this. And these are the actual rayas,
The rays, stingrays.
Yeah, these are these animals. Because with all these travels, they start to know new animals too, and they have to try to tell the people that is in Europe, how they look. So it's really interesting, the kind of verbal representation and image that we will find. This is the same image, but with color,
Watercolor.
Watercolor, yeah, I always forget, sorry. And this is the moment of the encuentro, the moment when they met. And I repeat here a really important part, the way the travelers and the conquistadors look, and the opposite of how the indigenous people look. There was always a clear difference between ones and others, because all this representation of indigenous, but to the monsters and all these beings, is always trying to make the difference between we are the ones, we are the Europeans, and the others are this huge mass of people that we don't know anything, but they are the others in capital letter. And I think, I believe that monsters let us know about how the cultural identity starts to building in Latin America. Because all these monsters we will see are still in our minds when we talk about Latin America. And I know it's a hard reference, but when we start to talk in Latin America about us, like Latin Americans, we start to see the difference between us and the rest of the world. And this is a word that starts in that period. You know, it would be.
There's a
Here?
caravan of monsters on the way to the southern border right now.
Yeah. So, well, I want to show you how these monsters appear in this image. These monsters are not new in the imaginary, or in the minds of the people, of the European people. These are images from 14th century. You can see a lot of monsters here. Do you recognize some of them? Do you know how to speak name? No?
Cyclops?
What?
Cyclops?
Cyclops? Yeah, the one with the one eye. What other do you know?
Maybe fair. No.
This one?
Yeah. Our bottom. Second.
How do you name it?
Satyr?
Satyr.
No, centaur.
Centaur. And we have, well, this kind of representation. Well, now I realize how to these things.
Horn.
Horn.
Yeah.
So this is from the north of Europe, and it's very interesting see how this image travel to the New World, because this is not new for the time of the Renaissance. All the Middle Age was place of monsters in the imaginary of Europeans. So you can see this Bigfoot here, this, yeah, it's kind of a wolf, but I forget the name in Spanish, so whatever, come here. Wait a minute. This is the Blemia. I will talk about Blemia. This is my favorite one. Yeah, it's true, I have a tattoo. Well, we have all these, but then we will start to see them in many different parts. So let's start. Let's this image in our minds, and I will return here. These were the first cannibals, actually, that Cristobal Columbus described. They were painting for people that never were there. So imagine the maker, the image maker, think about what Columbus see, but Columbus actually never saw these people. So it's a really interesting cadena, like chain to facts that never happened, but at the end we have image and text and unbelievable scenes. So this is from Brie, Theodore de Brie, is that made the image, and we can find a lot of these cannibals image. You can see it. This is the most important reference that Europeans had at that time about what happened in Americas. So we have a barbecue, we have caceria, a hunt, with this way too, and always, like, you know, the market. It's kind of weird, these representations. We can see here the difference between white people and the indigenous people, and I think that's really important too, because we can start to see this is not the hero, this is just a guy that is not in the correct place. But it's the way they have to tell us this kind of story. The rhetoric they used to be kind of not real, like very, very imaginary stuff that happened. And always the Spanish people and the European people are emphasizing in the violence and in the normal that these kind of acts are for these American people. You know, this is not like the sacrifice that the Aztecas and the Mexican people made, because this is different. you know that they really made the sacrifice in the pyramids, but this was not for every day. This is daily. These kind of essence are daily, are really. And as you can see, there is a lot. And we will return to my favorite one. This is Blemia. Do you remember the other one? Sorry, I will move topic. This is the most diffused Blemia that they had in Europe at that time. Most no Blemia. But then they will talk about this monster in America, and the history is really interesting because they believe that Blemias were a group of people that lived out of the Christians. So in the medieval period, with the Crusades, this was one of the fabulous group of people that they told they win against these Blemias. So Blemias were kind of friendly after that, and they used to pay with honey and milk for the civilized people, the winners of the crusade. So when we come to America, Columbus actually start to write about a population that is headless, that have their faces in the chest, and they are friendly. This is important difference between the cannibals and these people, because there are the good savage and the bad savage. And you have to fight with the bad guys, but you can try to make agrees with these people and conquest them. So you can see here this representation of nature from America. You start to see the houses, but too the plants, and I think it could be really interesting, make a work about the kind of plants that start to appear there, but that's of the other subject. You can see this monster changed the name here in America, and it's called Eguaypanoma. Eguaypanoma started to be a myth here in America, and today there still exists in the imaginary. We have an artist in Colombia, a conceptual artist, that made Rihanna with these faces last year, and it was in the Berlinale. Or Cristiano Ronaldo, I think, they know. So as you can see, it's not an image that goes in the time, it's just a thing that continues in our minds. And I think it's really interesting because it's just body. And this is a difference between the civilized people and not civilized people. You have brain if you're European or civilized people, and you have head. Remember in that time the importance of learn with the experience and experiments and all the kind of reasonable maybe process they start to focusing, and these people is just body, and body is not reasonable. Body is just our nature, no our reason. So I think I don't know, I like this monster because of this, and you can. This is very interesting because you can find them in a specific place in Latin America, and this is interesting for the other monsters too. You have giants in the south, but Eguaypanomas are in all the territory. You can find them in Colombia, you can find them in Brazil, or you can find them in here in USA, in California. This actually is 18th century image from California. This is from the population that lived here at that period. It's from a French traveler that made this image. And it talks about the Eguaypanomas. I think that's really interesting because it's 2 centuries before the conquest and before the first image of all these monsters. The image of monsters start to disappear at some point in these maps when they don't have to use them, the monsters, to come again to Americas and to do all these troubles because the crowns are already really interested in the territory, so they stop with these stories. Here. And we will have this big earth too, orejones. And this is really interesting because do you have ever seen an image like this? You can recognize something similar like this lady.
The pierced ears?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if you know about pre-Hispanic history from Colombia, a little bit, but the people, the first inhabitants that live in Colombia use long ring ears of gold. So this is maybe is a possibility the Spaniard saw this and just do the reference with the old monster they know. And this is really common in Colombia and other regions of the South America. The use of earrings or nose rings really heavy. You can see in the museums, like the Gold Museum in Bogota, they were like this, but gold. Imagine this heavy, how it will be. So they were deformed, the ears and the noses and the lips too. And the Europeans start to talk about orejones in New Granada. This one. And I have to, actually this has the same in the ear. You can see it's like a frog she has in her earring. It's really interesting. But you can see here with this woman, other legend, that they start to mix the monsters. It's not always the same monster that appeared with just one reference, but you will see that they mix a lot. So this is the one Amazona. The Amazona are a myth that becomes in classic era, but when they found the river and all these lands of, I don't know, forest, maybe, in America, they think they will find the Amazonas in these places. And actually they were big populations of people where women take or do works like the men. So this is a common reference. We will find two in the maps, the Amazona, and you can see here the Orejon too. So that's the mix they search. And we have Patagones. I think Patagones is a nice story too because actually they were real people. This is not like Plenia or like the cannibals, the other people. But this is real. They found people living in the south of the, in the Patagonia, and these indigenous used to live in the canoes.
Oh, canoes?
Canoes. You know, this is a really hard land. There is a lot of ice and water, and it's not warm. So the people that live in Patagonia used to live more in the water than in the land, and they built these huge canoes. With roof and all thing. And when the conquest went there, they think there are like kind of monstrosity because all the things they are using, wearing from the whales and the other animals they kill. And they are big. I don't know why exactly. This is a thing I never can find. But these people from the Patagonia were big, not as big as we can see here, but it wasn't the same size we can see in Mexico or in Colombia. It was bigger than them, so it started to put the giants here. And I forget to tell some about mermaids. When, this is so funny, when the first travelers that came with Columbus see the mermaids, actually they never saw a mermaid. They just saw the big sea animals in the rocks, the leones marinos.
Seals.
Sea
Sea lions.
Sea lions.
Sea lions.
And it's so fun because Columbus write, like, today we saw some mermaids in the sea, so that's really exciting, but they wasn't as beautiful as we think they are. So they are fat and they have long
Whiskers.
So it's important. This is actually, you realize in that moment that the Europeans just have a way to explain the thing, and it's the thing they have in their minds because they culture. So they start to explain the mermaids or the pineapple, pineapple, or these rare animals with things they can recognize in Europe. So this is really interesting in terms of the language, how they will create the creatures or all the things they start to painting. So this is still from Argentina. This is a 8th century print, and we have this, the most American monster. Actually, this is not a creation from a previous creation before arrived to America. This is actually found between Peru and Chile. We still don't know where was the first time they saw thing like this that I really forget the name in Spanish. But this monster, I promise I will remember the name, is the first that they really think they saw here after the conquest. This is like the last 17, I think it's early 17th century, and there are a lot of prints and watercolors about this monster. So, well, I want to finish with this. I know there are a lot of things to talk about this subject, and there are a lot of monsters, not just these ones, but I want just to introduce you to this subject that is unusual, but I really think it can tell us a lot of things. So I really have enjoyed.
Thank you, Slenka. Harpy. Harpy. American harpy.
Yeah.
So, Slenka, will you take some questions from the class?
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions for Slenka about these interesting, fantastic creatures?
Hi. You're talking a lot about prints, and that people were seeing prints. Where would a normal person like me see prints?
Where, let me see if I understand. Where you can see prints?
Yes, in the time period that prints were being generated to spread this information, where would a normal person see these prints?
At the time?
At that time. Yeah.
At that time.
I think the same. You can see prints if you are not illustrated people, or if you are not in the circles, because I really think this movement is not, it wasn't for everyone, and there are some professor or research that think this was the way that travelers tell everything for all the Europeans that were in Europe in that moment. And I think no, I think this just words for the elites.
The elites.
The elites. And of course there were prints for mass population, but it wasn't this kind of subjects at the 16th century, sorry. It started to appear in 18th century in prints a lot, in popular prints, and it becomes in this kind of circus. But this image were used for, I don't know. Let me think. In last century, in 18th century, the monster became another thing. They became like attraction, and they start to create places to show the monsters. So there, the prints with monster were more popular, and they start to circulate for more population at that time. But I think in the 7th and the 16th, it wasn't like as easy.
So we know that maps, for example, were very carefully guarded and protected. They were not seen by everybody
exactly.
because they were trade secrets, and the empires were fighting for these routes, so they guarded the maps. So those were not in wide circulation. And the prints, what you're telling us is the prints were only really seen by the elites, church people, right, and the the governors and that sort of thing. The average person never saw them, but they heard about them.
Yeah, exactly.
They heard the stories.
Yeah, and we have to understand too that the orality was really important at that time in Europe too, until 19th century. So yeah, I think they start to talk about these monsters, but I don't know, and I'm not sure if it were like pamphlets of this. Like it could happen with other things, but I don't know. We can maybe find a similarity with the religious prints. We can see because religious prints were really popular in all Europe and here too in America, because they work to show something to people that don't know how to read. So I think maybe, but it's not as common because the image were really controlled at that time.
And I wonder if the cannibal was more accessible as an image than the monster.
Yeah.
In other words, the cannibals were seen by many people because that's the dominant myth about Americans, whereas the monsters are more restricted.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, where did you do your research from first-hand documents, or were you using imagery that you saw in reproductions and stuff like that?
I just saw in reproductions, which is so sad. Now I think that with the society we can find and research a lot of subjects that we can not have access directly.
So for instance, where are the originals of these? In libraries in Europe?
In libraries in Europe, but this one is in Colombia. So this is cool because there are copies in my in the National Library in Colombia, but there are others that doesn't exist, and many of them are in reproduction of the journals of Columbus. So there are many copies.
Yeah.
So in some cases, not in the maps are in Europe,
Yeah.
but in some cases you can find the reproductions of the books of the travelers, and there are the monsters, a lot of them. Yeah. And the breed, for instance, for the cannibals, the most of the image I showed you are by the breed.
Thomas de Brie, yeah.
That was one of the most important printers at that time, and so there's a lot of copies.
How were these taken by like the Latin Americans? Like, did they ever see these images of all these monsters and like, what are you guys talking about? Or make their own monsters, I guess, like kind of based on that or something?
It's funny because I think Americans doesn't know that this was happening for them because no. So, but when you start to listen about the myths, the Latin American, you can find similarities with the mermaids and with the there are one monster called cola de lagarto, like
Lizard tails.
lizard tails. This is similar to many myths we have in all Latin America, But I think they never know that they was talking about monsters.
Do you have the myth of the chupacabra in Colombia as well?
Yeah.
Because it's very popular in the U.S., and especially in the Southwest. Is chupacabra, have you heard about that?
Yeah, we have. Yeah, that's right. It's funny because all Latin America, even here, we share a lot of myths. And all this start by this, but two for the original inhabitants from America. I think they have a lot of stories too, and they mix it with these stories and with the religion too. Remember, this time, this period will be really hard for the. They use a lot of image for religion, so that made sense.
And let me ask you a question. Do you think that this kind of myth-making about the other, do you think that has lasting repercussions in culture today? I mean,
Yeah.
what is I guess maybe that's a social political question, but do you think it has an impact on the way that we think about Americans from north to south?
Yeah, I think it has. Maybe it's not. I mean, when you start to talk about this, you start to see there are really some references you can see still today. I don't know if all people is thinking in monstrosity, but not only in the way we relate with North America and South America, but to the rest of the world, and even in between us, like Colombian and Mexican people, or Colombian and Venezuelan people, we start to talk about the other expressing the differences and never the common points. And I think that's a really hard trouble that we have in all our societies, because I can say, you're different because you're, I will do a stupid example, but you are different because you speak English and you are more white than I am. So this is our difference, and this is what you are you and me. But I think that we are all similar because we are all in a university today in the same room talking about the same way. So we can start by the other side. And then we never did that. We always started, this is different because you have, this is different, and that started the really hard difference. For instance, today we have a huge trouble with the Venezuelan people that is coming to my country because they are leaving his country by the political stuff. And it's so hard to listen people, Colombian people, talking bad about the Venezuelan people. It's the same. I mean, you can see a Venezuelan and Colombian people that we are the same. You know, we talk the same language, we have the same culture, we eat arepas, all the countries. Yeah, but people is always now. These Venezuelan people is so different because they are. No, stop being xenophobic and be. Yeah, when you create the other like a bad frame, that start really bad. And I think all this starts there in the conquest.
In other words, it's easier to magnify the differences than it is to accept the commonalities.
Yeah, for sure. But we have to work. I think it's really important to talk about these subjects, like how we create identities from the differences and not from the similarities. But
I think too about the World's Fair in Paris and how this hundreds of years prior to placing people of color in cages, to be savages in cages, to be viewed in a cage. I mean, this set the platform 400 years prior to that. And it just built and built and built. So
Or
thank you.
the myth of the cannibal, that one has just, we knew that there were cannibals in South America when we were kids. And my generation, I'm 60, but that wasn't too long ago.
Right, and the childhood fascination with
Yeah.
shrunken skulls,
Yeah.
right? Any other questions or comments? Slenka, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank
Very much. again in Western Montana. You come back.
Yeah, I went to. And, yeah, sorry, but for me it's really exciting to talk to real people because I always talk in virtual.
And you're going to be talking on campus on Monday?